Good morning, afternoon, and evening. This is the FGEN Experience. Documenting interviews and conversations between first-generation students at the University of Portland. In this episode, Dr. Angela Hoffman and Dr. Stephen Mayer, two established individuals in UP's chemistry department that were a major influence on this podcast's founder, Melanie Moivai, meet up for an hour to reveal their own first-generation identity in the intersecting worlds of science and education. Both share more in common than one would think, but in the ways that they differ, their unique experiences start to really shine. Recorded over Zoom on July 28, 2021, we hope you enjoy.
Hey, Angela, how's it going?
It's going fine, and unfortunately, I don't have a sabbatical, and fortunately, you do.
Yeah, it's a glorious thing about the academic life.
Yeah, my students are downstairs working hard, and I'm up here in my office. So we're looking at first-gen identity. I guess what it means to me is that students who come in without having a background in education except high school, whose parents and relatives can't really give them an idea of what they're getting into. I want to give them the best possible chance of surviving, and more than surviving, but thriving, and to let them know that, yeah, you can get through your first 4 years of college, and then you can go on and do other fun things with the rest of your life.
Yeah, so I'm curious. We haven't talked about it much, but what your background is. Maybe say a little bit about how you grew up and how you found yourself in college, and maybe I'll tell a little bit about my story as well.
Sure. So I've got one sister and 5 brothers. And my father was handicapped, and back in the good old days, handicapped people didn't get good jobs. So he was janitor, and that's the best job he could find. So he was at maybe 2 or 3 different elementary schools and St. Martin's for a while, just being a janitor and making $300 whole a month for all the kiddos and everything. So we were really, really, really tight on money. So we all went out and got jobs. And one place that I got a job for the summer was to cleaning dorms at St. Martin's. So I had an idea of what it was like, but I had no idea what college part was like. Just I knew what the dorms looked like. I knew how to clean the stairs and mop the bathrooms and do the dust mopping of the hallways and all that. But as far as college goes, and so then I joined the Benedictine community when I was just out of high school, like maybe 19.
Okay.
Young. And they indicated that they needed a second grade teacher. So they were going to make sure that I got to go to college, because that way they could get a second grade teacher. But I really didn't know what I was getting into at all. And so the first year that I went to school was after I had taught 1 year. So I had one education course, one college course. That's it. And I didn't know what I was doing. But I taught second grade anyway, when they were building the freeway through Tacoma. So it was a few years ago. And then I did work study when I finally got to go to college, more than only summers, because I did lots of summers. Then I did work study, and I learned a whole bunch of stuff about science doing work study in the biology department, classifying plants and cleaning up the biology samples that they showed students and all that stuff, cleaning house basically. But I think it wasn't what I wanted to do for the rest of my life, definitely not teaching second grade. But the fact that I got the opportunity to go to college helped me help one of my brothers who decided he wanted to go to college too, helped him a little bit on what to expect, so I could kind of be his big sister and help him see what was going to happen when he goes to college, because he had no idea either. but at least I got to help him a little bit. And then finally, I did get my bachelor's degree about 6 years later, because when you go to summer school, you don't get a lot of credits all at once. So I took chemistry in the fall. I'm sorry, in one summer, taught second grade, went back and took the second semester of chemistry, taught second grade, went back, took analytical chemistry and biochemistry one summer, and then I taught seventh grade. And that, it's just crazy split up mess. So then when I actually got a science degree after I got my bachelor's and a master's in education, I went back and got another degree of biology, because that's all I could get in 1 year, because I had to do it in 1 year, because I was also teaching elementary kiddos at the same time.
But that was a PLU, right?
Yeah, it's a PLU.
Okay.
So I got 2 degrees at PLU after I got my bachelor's.
What was the other degree at PLU?
Well, I got a bachelor's in education from St. Martin's. Then I got a master's in education from PLU. That was education, just science education. And then I got a science bachelor's at PLU.
Got it.
Everything's in the wrong order, of course, but so we both did PLU, and that's kind of cool.
Yeah. It's interesting that I think you were there late 70s, is that right?
73 was when I graduated the second time.
The second time is 73. Oh, okay. Yeah. So I was born in 1964, late 64. I think I started kindergarten in 1970.
Okay.
Yeah, just with that cohort. And so, neither of my parents went to college. My grandparents, actually, my grandpa didn't even didn't even finish high school. Fought in World War II. So, I come from a working class background. Heavy construction was the trade, and but I always grew up. My parents just put the idea in my head that I would go to college, and that I could do whatever I wanted. And I was always poking at things, getting myself in trouble, hurting myself, breaking things, and then fixing them before my dad got home. So, but that's, so I grew up curious and wanting to do something, but not really knowing what college was all about. And the high school that I went to, I think 11% of my graduating class. So I had a graduating class of, actually, it was big. I think it was over 500 students in the graduating class. And of that, about 11% went on to college, to include community college. So there were, my best friend went to United States Military Academy at West Point. And most of us, I think almost to a person, were somewhere in the Pacific Northwest. So that's when I went to PLU, 1983 to 87. And it's interesting, when I got there, I didn't really know what to expect. So I lived in the dorm. I had the full college experience. So I think, it's a bit different from what you experienced. That full college experience was exciting and new, and I was uncertain. I really didn't know, what to do sometimes socially. Other people were, that's where I learned what a legacy admit is. Someone who comes in, not necessarily because they don't deserve it, they do deserve to be there, but their parents, their grandparents, some cases great grandparents. You have all these Scandinavian families. I have Norwegian descent, but I didn't have that same clear sense of belonging in that community at PLU. I mean, it is very Scandinavian, but I spoke no Norwegian. And we had a little bit of the, some of the foods that were that I knew what they were because we'd eaten them growing up. But so there were bits and pieces that I tried to glom onto, and maybe sometimes too tightly. Like, oh, here's some identity. Here's an identity piece that I can grab onto. And I think really what I found, and what I encourage students to do is to know themselves. Even if you are the first person in your family to go to college and you don't really know what it is, I found out the hard way that you just have to be yourself. You need to do what it is that you were made to do. And I was made to do science, chemistry in particular. And I found my way, but kind of in fits and starts. And I think that's something we do here very well at UP is we encourage our students to think about who they are and what this community is all about. I think our first gen group is exceptional. First gen, FGEN that wasn't even a thing.
Oh, never.
When we were in college. It was
Never.
like you're a college student, and there were times when I had one, I should say coworker, student in my cohort, chemistry major, who poked at me. He was, dyed in the wool Republican. His dad was a plant manager of some big plant. Didn't like unions. My dad and my grandpa were both in unions, and so we were on opposite sides of the social line between the workers and the managers. And he flat out told me, he said, "Why are you here? You're supposed to stay in your lane," is essentially what he said to me. And of course, that's that kind of thing for me is encouraging in a strange way, because I'll show you. But that's not true for most people, I think. I mean, that would be it was discouraging. It was hurtful, painful. And I hope that doesn't happen here at UP. I don't know, because we're not in that. But my hope is that even if that does happen, even if somebody does say, "Hey, what are you doing here? You don't belong in this place. Go back to where you're supposed to be," that the first gen group and us, those of us who came through all of that, can be a source of great strength and encouragement to say, "No, you are in the right place. You are where you're supposed to be. You can do this. You will do this."
That's right. And not only that, but I absolutely agree that being yourself is the most important thing, because how can you try to be somebody else and do your best? You can't. You can also be much more discouraged. For instance, if you think that, and this is what I used to think, that when you're in college, you don't ask for help because you're supposed to know all this stuff. And that's really not true. Why do we have office hours to help people? But I did, it's like, this is what I thought when I first came to college is you don't ask questions, you just do it. And if I had asked questions, I'm sure I would have done better the first few classes, because I really, really and truly did not think that you're supposed to do that.
Yeah, I had the very same sense that, you're supposed to, you have a, K through 12 education, good test scores. That's how you got in here. You're supposed to know something. And that could not be further from the truth. You are a first year student in college. You're not supposed to know hardly anything. I mean, you have some basis, but we don't always assume that students have come into to the University of Portland with the same high school background. So, like in chemistry, I mean, we start right out of the gate teaching them safety in the laboratory, because that's a liability issue. And so that actually, I think, that's a very bare bones. If you want to know what we think about you coming in, it doesn't matter what high school you went to, what kind of experience you had. Maybe you took some sort of running start program at a community college. That doesn't matter. We're going to teach you from the very beginning how to be safe in a laboratory. We're going to show you what all the equipment is, how to use it safely, how to look out not just for yourself, but for those around you. And so that philosophy is true, I believe, in all classes, whether or not it's chemistry, physics, math, philosophy, history. You come into the class with the foregone conclusion is you are intelligent. You got into this institution. Now, let's learn.
And not only just learn, but learn from the mistakes that you make, because you're going to make them, and not get discouraged by the mistakes, because you're going to make them. Guaranteed you're going to make them. And sometimes if you're first gen, you don't even know you're making a mistake, but other people will be sure to tell you. And so learning from your mistakes is really, really super important. And also not being discouraged by it, because I know I've had students that have done like, okay, so you screwed up your first midterm. You're not dead. You have to figure out what you did, ask questions, learn from your mistakes, come back and make it better and make it work. Because school isn't just about success. It's about learning how to be successful. And not everybody that comes to college knows how to be successful right away.
Mhm, mhm.
Ask, 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 ask. Don't give up and just keep trying, because those are challenges, I think, that every student has, except some students may be aware of how to get help to get past the speed bumps. And I think some first gen students don't have that. They're not sure what to do. They know what to do when they've been successful.
Mhm.
What do you do when you're not successful? And how do you put that in your favor so that you can become successful? And I think that's one of the things that faculty is trying to help you do. And we hope that everyone who has the questions does ask them.
Yeah, I think I'm probably misattributing this quote, but I think it was C.S. Lewis who said that, don't let your suffering go to waste. Um, and the point there is that if something has gone wrong, you need to take a look at that and see what happened, to be self-reflective. And I mean, that's something that everyone should learn in college, is how to be self-reflective and think about what happened here. How did I make this mistake? What are the pieces that I need to resolve in order to learn? And oftentimes, I'm going to France in May on the Holy Cross Retreat, or I should say pilgrimage rather. So I'm learning French again. I learned French in high school to a point, but I find that my mistakes are actually more instructive than just simply getting it right. I mean, getting it right, it's like, okay, I think I know what's going on here. And I have this intuitive sense of like, how do you conjugate this verb? And so I do it correctly and, ding, and you keep moving on. But oftentimes I'll do it incorrectly and it'll show you, here's how to properly conjugate this verb. Like, oh, okay, I see what I did there. And that is so much more instructive than just simply getting it right because you remembered it. Because at some point you forget. Some people have better memories than others. Mine's not particularly good in my short term, that is. And so I find that make the mistake, correct the mistake, learn from it is a much better learning tool for me than it is, just simply to, memorize things and get them right.
Yeah.
So I often tell students that, they'll mess up on an exam somewhere in, the middle of the term. And I always tell them, I care far more about where you are than where you were. So if you get to the end and all of a sudden I see this great improvement in your performance, that means you're learning from your mistakes. Your grade is based on what you were able to demonstrate at the end of the course, not the mistakes that you made going in. And so, it's as rigorous as you can be with grading, but I will discount early exams to a much higher degree than I will later exams. If a student's doing great right out of the gate and then they really tail off, I always call them into my office and say, look, we got to talk about this. You started out great and you're not finishing well. Suggests to me that you knew something going in based on maybe your high school background, but that has run its course and now you're into new material and you're not really learning. So I think it's important, especially for first gen students, to know that making mistakes in the early part of the semester is not nearly as dramatic as they might think it is. In fact, I see it as a good thing. It's like, oh, you learned something, didn't you?
Right.
Yeah, I mean,
Get your attention.
Right? It does. And I make good use of that attention getting device called an exam Because as soon as the exam's over, if there was something where students didn't get a particular topic or there was a particular problem that was difficult to solve, I always come back with a supplement and say, hey, let's do this again. Let's learn from this. And that has worked so well over the years. But I think as a general philosophy, it's important for students to know that a class is not, a series of, learn some stuff, take an exam, learn some stuff, take an exam. It really is an iterative process of getting from start to finish.
And learn some stuff, take the exam, and then figure out what to do with the stuff you know, because you're going to need it again, because you're going to build on it. And so you take general chemistry, then you take organic chemistry, and you're totally starting from scratch again, if you're a chemistry major, that is. And then if you didn't really learn the basics, you can't build on it. And so I think not only what you know, but what you can do with what you know so that you can build on it. So by the time you're a junior or a senior, you have this background. And so you take a harder course that assumes that you already know all this stuff. And if you don't, then something happened down there at the foundation and you don't want your building to crumble on top of you. Another thing that I think is really important is I don't think we emphasize intuition enough. I think a lot of times you think that you have to remember everything and you have to, things that were covered in class, you have to, quotes, know it. And does that mean you just memorized it? Or does that mean you know what to do with it? And if you see a question you have never seen before, can you use it? That's what I mean by intuition. I think it's really important. And I think a lot of times you might think that classes are learn the facts, get the answer right, learn the facts, get the answer right, like you were saying. But it's more than just that, because what are you going to do with it when you're finished? Like, why are you taking this class? Is it so that you can check it off your to-do list and keep on taking classes to check off your to-do list? Or are you doing it because it's going to be useful for something you don't know what yet?
Right. Yeah, and especially in the way technology develops in our society, the skills that we're training at the undergraduate level will not be the same skills necessary, say, into someone's career, even early career, because the technology moves so quickly that we're teaching a student, say, how to write code in Python. Very useful. That may be useful down the road, but I liken it to learning something like Fortran. Funny story. So since I swapped offices with Kevin, and for our listeners, Kevin Cantrell is now the chair of the chemistry department. I used to be. So starting July 1st, Kevin took over, and so we swapped offices. And in the process, every time I move, I think this is my 6th move at UP in the 20 years that I've been here. I always purge. I just have this need to get rid of as much stuff as possible. And so I actually had a binder full of exams, like qualifying exams from graduate school. And I was like, why do I have this? So I was flipping through it to see if there's anything useful in there. And this is kind of a double-pronged story. One prong was I have all this intuition built up after all these years that some of these problems, which were really good problems, like the authors of these problems, the professors at OSU were really talented in terms of writing questions. It's like, oh, I have that same question on an exam somewhere that I wrote, or something very like it. And as I was flipping through it, I realized I don't need any of this stuff. It's all up here. But the other thing that I found, and this is my original point to this little diatribe, that is one of the professors thought he was clever, and he put a question on there. He said, write a Fortran program to do some task. And I looked at it, I actually showed my wife, and I said, hey, look at this. Could you answer this? And she said, oh, I learned Fortran. I said, does anybody use it anymore? Probably not. And so of all the questions in that entire book, that was far and away the most useless question because nobody uses Fortran anymore. I didn't know it at the time either. I mean, I hadn't learned Fortran. No big deal. I don't need, not only do I not need it, no one needs it.
Yeah.
Unless you're trying to go retroactive on some old program from the 70s or something like that.
Mhm.
But I guess the point being is that, maybe Python will change. Maybe something will replace it. But it's the problems that I found in that book, which I did recycle, by the way, because I don't need them anymore. But the story I have in my head, and the story is the best problems in that book were fundamental quantum mechanics, statistical mechanics, chemical kinetics. It wasn't Fortran. That's completely useless.
Mhm.
And so it's that deep understanding of atomic and molecular structure that, as a physical chemist, is that is part and parcel of what I do. And so you're absolutely right about intuition building. That specific one-off. How well can you use Excel? That has some use to it. Sure, we use it a lot, and it's good to be able to do that. But to not focus on, this is the same level of knowledge as understanding how to solve the Schrodinger equation. That's not the same thing. And so I think it's important, not just for first gen students, but for all students to recognize that there's a hierarchy of types of knowledge, things that are more important and more useful than others. So there's the skills of, how to use a calculator, how to use Excel, how to use Mathematica, how to write code in MATLAB or Python. That's at one level. And then there's the fundamentals of, do you understand how we understand the atom? Very careful with my language there. How we understand the atom is not likely to change anytime soon. But if it does, we'll be ready for it. If Excel changes, you just curse it, like, wow, where'd they put this?
Yeah.
They put it someplace else.
They are going to
Yeah.
change it. That's a guarantee.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So technology, all the stuff we use, explain everything. Zoom, like, where's that button? They moved it, from the last iteration. Whereas, how do you understand an SPDF orbitals? We're not moving those things.
Yeah, I think learning how to think is not easy, because you're gonna stumble, and you're going to think that you should have learned all of this already, but you haven't, because it's a process. It's not just, learning is a process. And so if you have all the pieces, it's like you get a jigsaw puzzle, and you try to put the pieces together. And if you've got missing ones, they're missing, and then you can figure out what they should be. That's kind of what happens when you take upper division classes, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Get all the basics. You learned it all. You got all the right answers on the test, but maybe you learned it and maybe you didn't. And then when it's time to apply them to upper division classes, you're ready. If you know how to think about it and you can understand more than just how to do it.
Mm-hmm.
For instance, if you're taking a really basic class and you memorize how to solve all the problems, that's not the same as knowing how to think through the problem and using it for something. And I know that there are some people, and maybe first gen people are more prone to that, is to think, I just have to memorize how to do all this so that I can get good grades.
Mm-hmm.
And then you think, okay, I want to go to medical school, so I have to get A's on everything. No, you don't. If you can show progress, you can, like Dr. Mayer said, if you can show progress, you're good. And that, one of the people at OHSU that reads these applications for students to get accepted there actually graduated from U of P. And he told me that most of the people who write letters, the U of P letters, are really good letter writers, and they cover all the basics. And most of the students that apply, even if it's the second try, will get in because they actually understand how to think and they can work through problems, and they didn't spend all their time trying to memorize answers. So it's a giant plus. If you can do what we want you to do, you'll come out on top.
Yeah. Well, and I think, too, it's interesting. I went to college thinking that I was pre-med, as so many do. And it's interesting because going back and asking myself the question, why? I've answered that question many times in multiple ways, but I think this is really important. And that is coming from a working class background, going to a working class high school where only 11% went off to college. The smart kids, the ones who were in all the advanced classes, which I was, with this handful of students going through. And if you're a smart kid, I guess, one of the things you do is you go to med school. I did not know about graduate school. I didn't even know, how do you become a college professor? I didn't know. In fact, I remember looking at my list of professors, and one of the professors in the mix was an assistant professor. It's like, oh, I don't want the assistant, I want the professor. I didn't even know what rank was, and I come to find out, it's like, oh, it's my brother was, career Army officer. He went to college as well, and got commissioned as an officer. And we did some comparing of notes, and the way it works is that you come out of grad school, like a grad student is like a second lieutenant, like first year grad student, like getting in, doing all the deal. And then you become a second lieutenant. And then like once you get out of grad school, get your PhD, become a postdoc, that's like a captain. So because you're in charge of a company. And then in the academic realm, an assistant professor is like a major, an associate professor is like a lieutenant colonel, and then a full professor is like a full colonel. And then the generals are a lot like, deans and provosts. Those are administrative posts. It's not so much a rank. Dean, provost is not a rank; it's a job description. Assistant, associate, and full professor, those are ranks, and that's it. That's all there is. But I think those are things that we need to tell our first gen students, like, here, let's break this down. Let me show you how this works. Because I didn't know. And I probably said embarrassing things like, oh, you're only the assistant professor.
Yeah,
like, no, that's not what that means. It's just a name.
Yeah, exactly.
But I think back to my story about being pre-med, is that it was my first year. In fact, it was a biology professor who was very kind. And I was talking to him, he was like, oh, I'm not doing well in this class. And he's like, well, how good's your short-term memory? And I said, not good at all. He goes, well, there you go. It's like, I wish I could tell you how to solve these problems, but they're not problems to solve. It's memorization. He said, what do you want to do? And I said, I want to go to med school. And he's like, no, you don't. That's all memorization. He was broad brushing it, and that's not true of med school entirely, but it is a lot of memorization. He said, so what do you really want to do? I said, I love figuring things out. I love solving puzzles. I like poking at things. He goes, seems like you want to do research. Do you really want to go and be a physician? And I had this great conversation with him. And in the span of, I don't know, maybe a half-hour conversation with a biology professor my freshman year, he convinced me that med school was not the track that I should be on. I should be thinking grad school, go get a PhD in chemistry. And the other thing that I didn't know, that actually I found most first gen students don't know. In fact, not only that, most students in general, even if their parents went to college, don't know this. You don't pay for grad school.
Not in science.
It's free.
Yeah.
You get a full tuition waiver, and you get a stipend. Stipends right now are running kind of in the mid 30s, like $35,000 a year with full medical, dental, vision coverage. It's better than when we were in grad school. But
oh yeah.
you're not going to get rich doing it, but that's not the point. The fact of the matter is you can provide food, clothing, and shelter and healthcare for the 6 years that you're in graduate school, getting your PhD. Postdoc, same thing. And so, you know, for somebody coming from a tight economic background, you know, where money is tight, college is a stretch, college is painful, and you're going, oh my gosh, you know, what am I going to do about all these loans? That's another thing, is that you go to grad school right away and your loans are all deferred. And so in some sense, the best financial position that you can put yourself into is to go to grad school, if that's what you want to do. I don't say don't go to grad school to avoid paying off your loans.
No.
It's way too hard. You got to want it.
If you really want to go to medical school or one of the professional schools, and you know, that's fine. But you're right. It was a big eye opener when I found out that, oh, I can go to graduate school and get my degree and pay $50 a quarter. Yeah, let's do it. And then I got paid, you know, like, okay, because I had no idea either. So after I applied, I found out that, oh, wow, I did the right thing. This is good.
Well, and I think, and I mean, you speak for yourself on this, but I know I did the right thing because it's exactly what I wanted to do. I mean, here I am. I mean, again, I didn't start my career at UP. I started at a small school in Pennsylvania. So I've been at this 23 years, 25 if you count postdoc. I mean, something like that. Quarter of a century I've been at this.
Long time.
Yeah, you've been at it longer than I have.
Longer.
To be fair. But, you know, this far down the line, I can say without a doubt that this was what I was made to do. I love this gig. And, you know, and I won't say, especially now that I'm on sabbatical, it's like, also now that I'm on sabbatical, I love teaching. With COVID and being apart from students and being in this virtual environment. I was on campus, I don't know, a few nights ago, walking my dog, and I ran into Brenda Greiner, and then a couple of students came by, and you know, one of whom is one of Dr. Hall's research students, Zion, and it was like, oh my gosh, this is why we do what we do. We had like an hour conversation in the middle of the quad at night.
Yeah.
You know, here we are in this idyllic setting at the University of Portland campus, talking to wonderful people, realizing this is exactly what I set out to do. And it gets better every day.
Yeah, I'll share that one for sure. 100% chance. It's exactly what I needed to do with my life, and I'm glad I got to do it.
Yeah, I mean, how many years is your career now? Like, where are you at?
I started teaching college a long time ago. I've been at University of Portland since 1989.
32 years.
That's since since here. And then I've taught a couple other places before I came here as well.
Okay.
So it's been a while.
Yeah.
And students have changed, but not really. I mean, the backgrounds are different, expectations are different, but people still have to learn stuff. Maybe they, you know, it's just, teaching is still teaching and learning is still learning.
Yeah, we've been doing it for millennia. You know, looking back on, you know, with the ancients, how they wrote and thought and communicated, we're human. And so humans interact in a particular way. And it's all about learning. No matter what you do, it doesn't matter what gig you've got. My oldest daughter, Jordan, graduated from UP this last year, and you know, she's working in a management track, and she's still learning. The company actually has a really good management executive training program, and so companies, actually really forward-thinking companies, continue to educate their employees. The ones who don't educate their employees, the ones who just plug them in and use them as cogs in a machine are not the ones who do well. And it doesn't matter what company it is or what you're selling, or what nonprofit, what sector you're serving. Education is key to having your company thrive. I mean, Thomas Jefferson stated it so well that the key to a free society is an educated populace. And I'll be visiting my former research student Andreas Gallman in a few weeks at the University of Virginia, Mr. Jefferson's University.
Sure, say hi for me.
I will indeed. Yeah. Thinking about the whole process of education from, whatever, I mean, parents when their kids are young, all the way to, PhD, postdoc, and on it goes. I mean, I can certainly attest that I am still learning. We never stop learning.
Exactly. And if you are looking to get a job, like Jordan is finding out, if you know how to work with other people, group work is not a waste of your time. And being cooperative and caring about your job and providing something that they need, you'll keep the job and you'll actually continue to learn. Otherwise, I mean, if just because the company wants you to learn doesn't mean that you will.
Right.
You have to put the effort into it. Education is continuing. It's not something that you're finished with when you're graduating. And whether or not you go to graduate school is not the important part. It's, can you contribute what you know to whatever your place in life is? And it's not going to be the same place forever either. You're going to keep moving around, doing new things, learning new things, contributing, just like you would be contributing here, only your new job is not the same as your old job. Your old job is school. Your new job is whatever you end up with.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of students, speaking of jobs, work while they're in college. I mean, I worked. That's how I paid for it. When you're in grad school, you work. Only there, your work is more intimately tied to what you're doing as a discipline. And I think that no matter what you're doing, and here's another piece of advice that I would give to students, and that is, if you need to work to help pay the bills, think about the what I'll just kind of call biggest bang for the buck, and that is, if I had thought about this more, I mean, I did think about this for my own children, my wife and I, is that what's going to make more money in terms of paying for college when you are, say, in high school? Should you work, flipping burgers, which is what I did for a little while. Worked at one of those big box stores, like I guess like called Pay and Save. It was Rite Aid or Walgreens, something like that. I worked at a store like that. And my grades dipped a bit as a result of working into the evening and getting home and having to finish my calculus homework. And it's like, oh, man, I'm tired. I can't really get this done. If I had kept my grades higher, I would have gotten more in scholarship money. And so it's an optimization thing where your job to get into college is to keep your grades high, because you're going to get thousands in scholarship money, as opposed to, I don't know, in my case, hundreds, if that, working at Pay and Save. And then in college, I worked off campus at an oil refinery, which was interesting. I still remember it. So there were some good parts to that. But the commute and the hours really dug deep into my, my reserves. Sometimes, I'd have to work until 4 a.m. and then be in an 8 o'clock class. Um, and it doesn't go well when you are operating on just a few hours of basically a nap, and you've been working in an oil refinery all night. And so, I think for students in the sciences, if you can find some sort of science related work, and something that we do in our department, of course, is having workshop leaders, lab TAs, and it pays minimum wage, which is about what you're going to get. In fact, I think it pays a little bit better than minimum wage. But you'd be hard pressed to do that unless you're working at a restaurant getting tips. But again, I don't recommend that. You have to think about, if you've got scholarships coming in, can you attract more scholarships? That requires better grades. And so that's something to think about in terms of just the financial piece. My grandparents didn't really help me think about that. It was just go make as much money as you can. Well, it's minimum wage, whatever, $3.15 an hour at the time. It's like, no, you're not going to make much money that way. It would have been better if I had, just kept my head down and, done well in my studies and in sports. Because depending on, if you are an athlete, you might turn that into a scholarship. So there are a number of ways to think about this, but I think it's important to think about the long-term goals that you have and how the work that you do, even when you're in college, how that can help. Because I think our students who are lab TAs and workshop leaders have a real advantage in going on to grad school, because the people who are reading these applications often comment back to me or back to the students themselves, this is huge. You already know what to do with regard to putting you into these TA positions, because what you did at UP is very similar to what we're doing here. And you know how to balance that with your own studies, your own research, especially getting into a research lab. So if you've done what we offer here at UP, and that is, say you are a workshop leader, a TA, and you're doing research with someone, you essentially are being trained to be a really excellent graduate student.
Yep. And not only getting into the program and having the scholarships and such, the rest of your life matters too. You have to balance your time between, you do need to sleep. You do need to have friends. You do need to do things like that. So you can't just be your nose to the grindstone and getting the most money you can for what you can get. The rest of your life matters too. And that's a hard thing to learn sometimes, that you do have to have time out. You do have to sleep. Yes, you do. And being overcommitted sometimes, if you're a new student coming in, you might think, oh, I've got to join this club. I got to do this. I got to do that. and I got to work. It's hard to balance all of that at the same time that you're also preparing your mind to learn stuff and to take the time to actually learn it, rather than just sort of cram everything into your brain because you've got so many other things going on. So making choices of what your outside projects will be, you've got to be selective on that. And of course, you might, go to a concert, you might actually be in the choir, all of those things are really important, but they're a little bit outside of the education, but you do have to do that too. So you don't just do your schoolwork, don't just do your job. You also need an outside life besides that. But the hard part sometimes is to balance it, because you don't want to put all your effort into learning and to taking classes and getting the highest possible grade, where you don't have a personality. You're not going to get a job. I know, actually, this is a sad story, but a student, I think he was actually first generation too, who graduated about 1,000 years ago from U of P. And he was actually the top grade in everything. He tried to get into medical school 4 or 5 times. He never made it. He couldn't pass the interview. He had no personality. So, and he had no outside interests whatsoever. And you need everything. You need to be a human person as well as someone who is brilliant and being able to pay for things. It's tricky, but it's an important balance, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm glad that you bring this up because something that UP is so good at is developing community. I mean, that really is at the heart of the Holy Cross mission. We have that as faculty. I go to the Holy Cross dining room, or used to, when it was open, but it's opening again. And even though I'm on sabbatical, I'm still going to go there because it's so important to me to have that community with scholars across different disciplines. We have friends, a large community here in Portland, and outside activities. Soon after this, I will ride my bike. And we've got a beautiful river campus that's developing, and soon, people will be able to go. I actually have been for years now, taking my kayak out there. I have a stand-up paddleboard now that I take out there. There are so many things to do here in Portland, and it's important, I think, that you do that with others, that you build this community around something besides your particular area of study. It's not that you can't go pal around with chemistry majors and talk about atoms and molecules while you're stand-up paddleboarding. There's some silly chemistry jokes that pop up here and there while you're doing whatever you're doing. But the thing is to integrate it, to have a holistic view of your life. And you're absolutely right, Angela, that without that, you become very monochromatic.
Yeah, that's a good word.
Yeah. And it's not interesting. I mean, you're missing the better part of life if you don't have other people to share your interests with. And so there has to be something beyond just, this one thing that you're studying.
Yes, very, very, very true. I think we've gone through all of the ideas that are on the list, except for we didn't do them in any special order. We didn't talk too much about hobbies, but that's okay. We didn't talk too much about music. That's okay. We all know that we like good food. Okay, that'll do it.
Thank you for listening. If you're a first-generation student, staff, or faculty member at the University of Portland who is interested in speaking on this podcast, particularly with a friend, classmate, or mentor of yours who is also first-gen, don't hesitate to reach out to John and Norman to schedule a time and place to record. Our emails are hartj22@up.edu and hilker22@up.edu. Support for this podcast comes from the Public Research Fellows Program and the First Generation Program of UP's Shepherd Academic Resource Center. The FGEN experience at the University of Portland was created by Melanie Moivai, editing and sound by Jonathan Hart and Norman Hilker, funding provided by the Public Research Fellows Program.